Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butts-Chester. You know what I like to do on the show. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today I want to get you fired up about the book Nellie's Journey. Its author is Mary Druce, and I have her on the line today, and I'm so excited to be able to talk to her about her book about sharing the journey. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about Mary. Mary trained for the theater in London, England. She holds the bronze, silver, and gold medals from the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, and also holds an associateship from this institution. Further training was received from the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, and this was followed by 6 years of work in repertory training and children's theater. In 1973, she migrated to Canada with her husband and 2 children. Though beginning her storytelling career as a volunteer in her children's school, this quickly morphed into professional engagements in libraries, schools, churches, and historic homes. Half a thimble, her piece for voice, organ, and bells, were performed at St. James Cathedral in Toronto. This at the time of its installation of bells from England. She now sings in the choir there. She has told several times for cbc-radio and for summer programs offered by the cfto-tv station. Her 4 plays in the Shakespeare Womanly series, those exploring the continuing lives of his female characters following the end of the plays, have been seen as storytelling festivals in both Toronto and Ottawa, and also at the Ottawa Fringe Festival and the Toronto Summer Works Festival, this as well as in schools and libraries. Thinking herself at age 82 to be at the end of the road as far as career was concerned, she launched into writing her first novel, Nellie's Journey, and until COVID-19 happened, was performing readings in libraries everywhere. Now, of course, we can understand that with COVID-19 that we wanted to take all precautions and make sure that we were all well. Now, listeners, you know what I'm about to say. Go on, get your coffee, get your tea, get comfy, get cozy, because we are about to get started. So, good morning, Mary Druce. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, I'm happy to be there.
Thank you so much. Now, I love that you have chosen a career in the arts. I have so many people that are very special to me that too have taken a career in the arts and have studied at schools such as yours. At what age did you realize that the arts was where we could find your heart? Were you a small child, a teenager, young adult? Where did it happen?
Well, I don't know. When I was 3 years old, apparently, I was put down to live with my aunt to be out of the bombing in the war, and she asked me to say my prayers. So I said, "Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep." And she said, Mary, yes, very good. And I said, "Oh, did you like it? Shall I do it again?" It's a very bad sign. And just went on into theatre from there. My mother did not approve at all. She used to say, she was a Scottish lady, and she used to say, "Oh, lassie, I tried so hard to make you a lady, and you're nothing but a bloody gypsy." And so, yes, I think I was born an actor, yeah.
I love it. I love it. Now, I have to tell you, parents out there, if your children have a certain personality, as my grandmother would tell us, don't take the spirit of the child away from the child. It is a beautiful thing. We all have the personalities that we have, and I know that I was a bit of a ham, as we say here, when I was a little child as well. And look where it has led us, to being authors and on the radio. So it is a very beautiful thing when we are who God intends for us to be. I love it. I love it. Now, being an author, I totally and completely understand that you understand the power of words because you are involved in theater. But when did you understand that your written word had just as much power as someone else's? Being an author, when did you decide, yes, that's what I want to do next?
Well, at first, it wasn't authoring as much as adapting stories.
Mm-hmm.
I know, again, my mother, who was a very good nurse, used to say, want me to be a nurse, and she'd say, oh, Lassie, why can't you do something useful for society? Well, all I can say is, when I have adapted stories and told them, I've had responses like, I didn't feel too well today, and I nearly didn't come, but you made me laugh, and I'm so glad I did. And I think that that's useful. And then that slowly morphed into writing. I guess the first things that I wrote that were from my own self, except that they were the Shakespeare's Women series. So I have to acknowledge Shakespeare had a great influence on that. But I've taken their stories of certain women on from the end of the play. And I had a Russian sister-in-law, and she used to say, why you write Shakespeare? Oh, Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare. I'm writing something else, and that's what. That's when I began to think for myself, basically. And then with Nellie, I don't know quite what happened. I'm always scribbling poetry and protest letters, a lot of protest letters, and all kinds of things, and plays, poems, and suddenly Nellie just came to me one day when I was quite old. I was about 79 when I started writing her, and I had far too many doubles, coffees at the coffee shop. Sat and scribbled and scribbled and scribbled, and people came passing by and said, what are you writing? Are you a writer? And I thought, well, yeah, I'm a writer. And so they've all been looking forward to the book coming, but then the book was a bit later, but by the time it takes getting published and all the rest of it, I'd left the coffee shop, so I don't know what happened to them. But anyway, yes, so she just popped into my head. I guess a lot of it was from my father's experiences. He was a boy soldier in the war when he was 15, and some of his stories are quite. I've used those. Nellie's older brother George, when he is at the front with his boots being sucked under in the mud and the dead bodies all around and the wounded trees and the shooting and the awfulness of it, an awful, awful war. And he was there and he survived and he told me about it. So George, in a way, I've based on him. And I guess one of the things that I got interested in is that Nellie, I'd done at university, I'd done some Freud and his writings on PTSD, which was called, I forget what it was called now, but it wasn't called PTSD. And people said, get over it, go on, men, go, you're back to work now. And Nellie begins to think, no, there's more to this than that, and especially when her brother is affected by this PTSD. So I have her heading perhaps towards some kind of a medical degree at some stage, although that would be in another book, and I don't know whether I'm going to do that. I've left them all in a happy place, and I think I'd like to leave them there. Some of the early stories of women in academia are quite appalling, absolutely appalling, the way they were treated, especially medicine. So I don't particularly want her to go through that. So we finished at a nice point.
And there's nothing wrong with ending it on a nice point, but you are definitely correct. Women did get a lot of unnecessary treatment. That is very true. Now, have you yourself experienced the war?
Yes, I did. Some of my earliest, I was born in 1938. I heralded the onset of war. My brother's birth 7 years later heralded the end, although he was born in an air raid. I remember the bombs falling and my grandmother rubbing my feet and keening, "Oh, the poor wee wains. Oh, we'll all be dead in the morning. We'll all be dead in the morning." Well, we didn't die, but there were quite a few near misses. And I do remember standing underneath the cherry tree in our back garden and being mesmerized by the two fighter planes overhead, one with the British target sign, the other emblazoned with the swastika. And they were right over my head, spitting angry fire. And I could hear my mother screaming my name from the kitchen doorway. I knew that she couldn't move, because neither could I. Our feet were just stuck to the ground. But eventually they took off and crashed at the end of the garden. And I have Nellie getting all angry about that sort of thing. Actually, several people have said, "You are Nellie." But perhaps that's what it is. Anyway, we had some nicer memories too. The American soldiers would come with their tanks and trucks, and their heads held high and looking straight to the front as they marched, but with a grin on their faces and their pockets bulging. And as they passed us, the boys would chant, "Have you got any gum, chum? Have you got any gum?" And then the soldiers would delve into their pockets and start throwing out the gum, and we couldn't get anything like that in England at that time. Nothing, no chocolate, no anything. We would all scrabble to pick them up. Woohoo, loot.
I love to hear the stories from those who are willing to share. And you're right. We do need to make sure that we are telling the stories, we're sharing the stories, we're writing down the stories, be it that it is a true story from the eyes of the person who has experienced it, or through the eyes of a character in a book. We definitely need to tell the stories. My father was born in 1935, so there are bits of stories that he shares as well, different perspective, but stories that he has heard about the experiences. And I'm a quite nostalgic person, so I love to hear about people's experiences, about how something that wasn't good turned into a way to eventually bring about some good. And perhaps that's looking at all of us and realizing that we all matter and that we're all important and that we are interconnected and that we all need to simply love each other more. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Now it is almost time for us to go to break, Mary. But before we do, can you remind everyone what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
Well, it was published in Canada, first of all, and it's available at Amazon.ca and Indigo.ca. And I know that people from the States have used the .ca and they bought books. So that's it at the moment. I'm also discussing with Conquer Publications, which are down in the States, about doing some more, but we haven't really got round to that. Much discussion about that yet, so I'm not quite sure. But in the meantime, you can certainly get it at Amazon.ca and Indigo.ca.
Alrighty, listeners. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this.
Discovery, not just a sec.
What would it look like if we listened more? Could the right voice, the right set of words, bring us all just a little closer, get us to open up, even push us further? It could, if we took the time to listen. The most inspiring minds, the most compelling stories. Download Audible and listen for a change.
We're home during COVID-19, but we're not alone. New Life Pastoral Counseling can help. For affordable Christian counseling, visit newlifepastoralcounseling.com or call 562-209-2083 today.
Hi everyone, Dr. Angela here. Did you know that Daily Spark is now on Facebook? That's right, you can visit with me at facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I want to know more about what you're thinking. I'd love to know which interview did you find the most entertaining or the most informative. I want to talk to you, and I want you to be able to talk to me. Simply visit facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butts-Chester. You know what I like to do on the show. What do I want to do? I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you. And my guest today is Mary Druce, and we are talking about her book, Nellie's Journey. Now, Mary, my next question for you is, how much of your father's experience as a boy soldier in the First World War, how much of that affected your writings of Nellie?
Well, as I was saying before, I've given some of his descriptions to George, the elder brother of Nellie. So he described the conditions in the trenches and the mud, the ducking from firing guns with stretcher bearers, like my Harry from the novel. And that really informed that particular chapter. We find him chewing on his pencil, just wondering what the heck he can write home about that would not disturb his parents, especially not his mam. My father talked about all kinds of things, like having to chase the chickens and wring their necks to get some food, and just the sheer awfulness. And the horses, so many horses were killed. They became a target because they were useful, of course, in pulling the wagons. And after the war, they had to send to Australia and to America, which is something I didn't realize until I did research for this, to restock the European horse population. And it's such a shame. I love horses. I used to work with horses in the summer holidays, and just to think of those really noble creatures being sort of shot down and buried in the mud. And I have Harry, which becomes a love interest for Nellie, the pacifist stretcher bearer, who is doing his bit by not fighting, but by risking his life every day. The descriptions that my father had of these people were a lot of them, in fact, and the medics too were pacifists, but they went to help and help the men. The killing was just dreadful. It was the most awful war. I mean, all wars are dreadful. I have Nellie inveighing about war, and just like I do in my protest letters. So, and I do think that there is a resemblance to the latest pandemic, where people are saying, what? Young people particularly, what's going on? We can't live our lives like we normally do. Well, no, it has happened before, over and over and over again. So sorry, boys, and girls, but we have to stick it out.
And it's so funny that you mentioned that, because I thought that it was quite informative of Governor Cuomo when he put up a slide that demonstrated how long things actually lasted. And the 1918 flu, some call it the Spanish flu, how long those things all lasted, the war, the depression. And he said, we're only on day 54. So please be patient. Please hold tight that it is possible to still live your life, but just a little differently, while we fight this war of this virus that's going on. And I thought that was quite, I don't want to say ingenious as though it were for any other reason other than to give perspective. But I thought that it was a great way to introduce conversation also into the conversation for any generation that was blending into another. I was quite lucky to have a grandmother that was a small child. I'm sorry, a young adult during the Depression. She was born in 1903, so her perspective of going through the Depression was different than her little sisters who didn't remember it quite the same, or for someone who was able to talk about just how do you make sure that everyone is still okay, even though the world isn't okay right now, and to be able to have those stories of a grandmother or an aunt or an uncle and say, this is what we used to do, so how can we make this apply now? How can we still have this togetherness? So thank you for reminding us of that. As far as speaking of the various relationships and how that works, where did you find yourself in the understanding of, I believe, the North of England character, Mam and Pa?
Well, this came from my first professional work in theatre. As an actor, I'd be either touring with a show or playing in repertory or all across the British Isles and Ireland. Certainly, Mam and Pa are drawn from a series of landlords and landladies where we would be billeted. Now, not all of them were nice, but most of them were. And I've had some very warm memories of landladies and landlords, mostly landladies, who were very warm and very kind. And I remember one in particular in Hull, and in the north of England, where I wasn't even understudying, but the leading lady fell ill with a burst appendix. And my landlady break the news to me that I had to go and do the show, which was interesting because I hadn't even learned the lines, but I somehow made them up. So we got through it, and I learned the lines on the way down to Cardiff the next day, and had it all in my head by the time. That was terrible because it was an afternoon performance, and then 15 minutes later we had to go and do it all over again with people posted in the fireplaces with the book, but I didn't need them. I just went on talking. I knew the story, so I went on talking, and we got through. But she was wonderful. She was so sympathetic, and I went to her 2 or 3 times when we played Hull. And another one in Leeds, who was a lovely old lady and very very protective of her young people, and one of the girls in the show was accosted by a man because there wasn't a phone in the house, and she'd gone down the road to phone. And that's another thing that my grandchildren can't. You had a phone that hung on the wall? You couldn't walk around with it? Oh my goodness! Oh, M, they call me M. Oh. Yeah, I still don't have a smartphone actually, but a man attacked this young girl while she was in the phone booth, and by golly, and I can't remember her name now, but she went down, she was explaining to me, and she was right North England, and she saw him off, and don't you touch my girls, and they're really marvelous people. There's a great deal of difference between the North and the South, and I love them. I really enjoyed being up there.
I love those stories. And speaking of the phone, it's quite funny because we were just talking the other day, and I said, a classmate of mine, he says, our children will never know the feeling of someone hanging up on you. How before, when you had a landline, if you hung the phone up on someone, it made quite a bam in your ear. You knew that you were hung up upon. Now there's just simply just a little boop boop, like just a little tone that you hear because you've been disconnected, and just the simple things of how things change. I do remember rotary phones. I do remember phones having 4 little prongs on them that you had to plug into the wall, and you could only go as far as the cord would let you. Depending on how long your cord was, that's as far as you went. So that's true. And how older homes used to have little, I don't know what they were officially called, I call them phone stations, where there was a little alcove in the wall where you would place the phone so that you could put a little settee, a little bench there, so that you could talk on the phone. And I thought that was just quite ingenious. It's like, how lovely that they've included a place for your phone. But now with smartphones, what all we can do, I tell you, how things have changed.
Walking down the street, I often stand and wait for people well, we're going to cross the road, and I'm looking this way, making sure, and everybody else is on their phone to spend the time while they're waiting for the lights to change, you know?
Yeah.
So, and then I step off, and their bodies sense that I'm stepping off, and they follow me. And I want to say, guys, one of these days I might make a mistake, and then we'll all be toast. But
Yes, that is so true. And you know, we do need to pay better attention, because you're right. They do simply go because you have gone, and they don't look first. So we do need to be much more mindful of that. You are correct. It reminds me of when we're at the stoplight. And if you're not paying attention, if the other car starts to move, then you move too, and you have to be careful, especially if you have the turn late and it's not your turn to turn. That is so true. Now, speaking of memories, what are some of your memories of the Second World War? Were they incorporated into any of your story?
Well, the general feeling, yes. It was run differently. They did have some bombing, I know, but not the way that we did. Most of the fighting was in the trenches, you know, and. I've had lots of experience as a child. We were always told that we were to, if we were on our way home or coming and the sirens went, we were to jump into a ditch and we were to put on our gas masks, which we never did. They stank. They were horrible. And at the end of the we found that it was all a scam anyway, and they wouldn't have protected us. So I remember once we were walking home and the sirens went, and we were up between 5 years and 7 years, a group of us, and we leapt into the ditch, and all these young men above us were trying to kill one another in their planes. And suddenly there was this scream, and out jumped one of the boys, and we all jumped out as well to look at what was going on, and his shirt was going boom, boom, ribbit, ribbit, ribbit. He'd had a frog in his shirt. And there we were, these guys, youngsters, fighting to the death in the sky, and we underneath killing ourselves laughing at this blooming frog. And then all the planes crashed and burnt, and we went home for our tea. And it was all so taken for granted. And we were strafed in the playground, you know, coming out. It was a church school, and we'd move across, and we'd go down into the crypt and then come out again. And one day the all-clear siren had gone, but there were some planes hovering behind the clouds, and they came down and strafed us, children, in the playground. And I can remember the of it, and nobody was killed, nobody was hurt. But, you know, it happened on both sides. I have a German woman friend, and the same thing happened to her. So I think something happens to people when, after the war, when they realize what they've done. And there was an awful lot of PTSD then. So very, very true.
They tell you that war is hell, and I truly believe that it is not only the creation of such with the weapons that are used and the after effect of using weapons, but also the effect that it has on our hearts and minds. You are most correct. I think that we, as a world, will have a sense of COVID-19 PTSD for those that were affected in certain ways.
Yeah.
If you've lost a loved one, or if you worked in the trenches, if you will, in the various medical facilities, your understanding of this virus is totally different than someone who simply has been quarantined and you're well. We still are able to kind of have a semblance of our normal lives. So I know that we will definitely have future conversations about that. Well, it is time for us to go to break, Mary. But before we do, could you remind everyone what is the title of your book and where can we get a copy?
It's called Nellie's Journey, and you can get it at Amazon.ca or Indigo.ca. And you can get it from the States at CA. Yeah. So.
Alrighty, listeners, now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this.
We're home during COVID-19, but we're not alone. New Life Pastoral Counseling can help. For affordable Christian counseling, visit newlifepastoralcounseling.com or call 562-209-2083 today.
And we are back. Thank you so much for spending your time here with me on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. My guest today is Mary Druce, and we are talking about her book, Nellie's Journey. Mary, my next question for you is about plot, or perhaps I should say subplot. Were there any kinds of subplots in your novel, other than those of Nellie, Harry, and Penny?
Oh, yes. There were. There was all kinds of other people, including two rather amusing nuns. One of the girls at the front actually turns out to have been a nun, Scylla. She is a very special person. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. You were wanting the other people in the plot. Well, there was Ma and there was Pa and there was the whole family. Then there was Alice, who was a very pertinent part of the getting Nellie with her own daughter Penny, and they became great friends, going to evening classes, which then led them to training to become VADs, the volunteer nurses at the front. And there was Scylla, and there was also the difference between the world of the working people and the world of the upper classes is very much the story of Robert and Vivian, who are upper class. That takes us on a roller coaster ride, and there are, of course, many instances of so many other minor characters. And the tide was turning for the working class. It was the beginning of a respect for the workers. They expressed in the birth of the trade union movement for a start, and also it was the beginning of women being able to cast off the crippling shackles of the 18th century, and the birth of the hard-fought for suffrage movement, which votes for women. There's this, and there are people from Pembridge House, which is the big house that Robert, who does damage to the young Sally, this young sister, but she recovers from that, and so that's used as that's used as an example of the huge difference between the dwellings of the working class people and what they have to put up with, and the upper classes who just don't know what's going on down below. So, and the whole of that war, I think, was the beginning of the opening up of people suddenly thinking, just a minute, I'm better than this. I can do better than this. Mm-hmm. I don't have to succumb to being a nobody. And I think that comes into the book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was just flicking through trying to see where I'd put it, but I couldn't remember where I'd put it. So anyway, that's the gist of it.
No worries. Now, and we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but what do you feel is a way in which war, including the pandemic, we were just kind of talking about that, how can that bring about a refreshing new way for us to look at the world and how we are with each other when we are post-war or post-pandemic, for that matter?
Oh, I've been thinking about the pandemic a lot, yes, because the problem is that always, and it's human nature. At the time it's happening, we've got to do more. We've got to do what's happening now with this pandemic is wonderful in some ways. There are the whales are beginning to able to sing to one another again, and so they're not beaching themselves up on the beach because they're in despair because they can't hear where their mates are, and birds and fish and the air is cleaner. So suddenly, my daughter was in the Himalayas, and she said it was just amazing because it's always been very overcast with pollution. And when she was there, it was clear that you could actually see the mountains. So we know that all this is possible if we stick to our guns. But whether we will or not, I don't know. And that's the same with war. There will never be another war. This is the last war, people said at the end of the First World War. Unfortunately, there has been many, many, many wars. Yeah. So I hope that people will understand that if we have to live a different kind of way and not want too much stuff at the expense of what's happening to the earth. But the earth has been trying to kill us.
It's so interesting that you say that because, as they update us about the horrific numbers of those who have died of COVID-19, I like how some news anchors try to end their broadcast on a happier note. And I remember one day, one particular broadcaster said, we mourn the loss of all that we will never meet, that we didn't even know were there, but in the numbers we see that their lives have existed. And, my heart does go out for the world because it's just amazing what's going on. But then he said, but if perhaps this can be a bit of sunshine, is that our world is also healing because we as humans are not out and about every day with our hustle and bustle, that the rivers were clearing up, the ozone layer was repairing itself a bit, the smog wasn't there, so on and so forth. And that sometimes you would even see animals that were walking down your streets and roads, depending on where you lived, because they'll say, hey, where did the humans go? And, now there are way more duck crossings and goose crossings and seeing the rabbits go by. I know that we are able to see far more geese in the area now because there's not as much hustle and bustle. So
yes,
from that end. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I met two geese the other day when I was out walking by the lake. Had a conversation with them. You know, they just looked at me and went blah 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 blah. So I had a chat with them back. And they've also there's been a female fox, a vixen, has had several babies, and in a fairly public place, underneath a walkway thing. But still, people have. They've now got the police there to put people away, to give the animals a chance to be private. So, yeah, because everybody was coming, of course, you know, naturally.
Of course.
But so they're being protected. But she obviously thought it was a very quiet place, and she was going to have her babies there. So
yes. So it's like, don't disturb that. Give her the privacy that she needs until she's able to move on. Because the good part is that the animals will eventually, as we start to come back out, they will kind of go back into the recessed places where they were, and they'll figure out, the humans are back. All right, let's go back to plan B, as it used to be. But I thought that was very, very nice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's sad. Well, I have a whole bunch of baby squirrels who were born on my deck, and they're taking advantage of everything that is there. And I'm trying to shoo them away, and I clap my hands in one sweet little thing. I mean, they're very sweet when they're babies, but wicked when they're toss your flowers all over the place. And I slapped my hands in front of his face. Go, and he fell over backwards and fell off onto the roof below, and I felt so guilty. Oh my God! So I found a man with a ladder, and we put the ladder up, and an adult squirrel went up and fetched him down by the ladder. So it's amazing. They're all there. And when it happened, when the baby first went over, there were squirrels all over the place with their tails going swish, 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 swish. Alarm, alarm, alarm. Amazing. These animals have a life, and it's all going on under our noses, and we don't notice it when we're all so busy dashing around.
Yes. I love how it has all calmed us down and put us in a place where we can, I think, reflect a little bit more, and we can reassess and figure out what's truly more important to us right now. Trying to see the bright side out of a little bit of darkness in the world. I agree with you. Now, I have to ask, and it's something that I do ask many of the guests that are on, do you have a sequel planned? Are there any more writings you feel under your belt?
Well, as I said, I'm thinking of leaving these in a happy place. I've actually been writing some poetry. I wrote a series for Easter and read it at our cathedral, which were well received. And people are saying, well, what's going to happen next? I had a sweet woman, actually, from the States, and she didn't know how old I was. And I had a very nice letter from her saying, oh, obviously, I so enjoyed your story. I'm so looking forward to the sequel. You have a great career ahead of you. And I thought, she doesn't know that I'm 82. I don't think I have a great career ahead of me. But anyway, I keep thinking. I did some research, and as I say, I found one university, the female doctors, student doctors, were not allowed to eat with the real doctors, the guys, in the cafeteria. They had to bring their own sandwiches and eat them among the cadavers in the morgue. And one girl. There were three of them, I think, who actually managed to get into the Edinburgh School of Medicine, and this was in the late 1800s. And the professor insisted on saying, "Good morning, gentlemen," and didn't. And so they would chorus back, "Good morning." And then they had a man there with a towel wrapped around his middle so that he wouldn't affect the females, So this girl gets up and she pulls it off his waist and said, "If I am going to be a doctor and treat this sort of thing, we need to know what it is I'm treating." And there was pandemonium. And when she was on her way home, the male students attacked her and really beat her up and called her a whore.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. And women also were not allowed to graduate from Cambridge with a PhD from Cambridge University until 1948.
Wow.
That late. Young people.
Yes.
Anyway, that was a long time ago. I was 10. But yeah. So interesting.
Wow.
I'm tempted, but at the moment, it's not actually coming. I'm writing bits and pieces of other stuff, and I'm singing I was singing in the choir. Of course, everything is closed now. So,
yeah.
I'm doing a lot of piano practice at the moment, and it is practice. I don't call it playing, but it keeps my music chops going. So, and as I say, I write protest letters, about animals and whatnot. So I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe I will. Maybe I will. I'll see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Before I turn 90.
You never know in what way you may be inspired to write, something else, or express your ways or your views about something that may not be a sequel to this particular story, but could inspire someone else to do, to find your work. Mm-hmm.
So I've written a children's story, a Christmas story, about a little girl who is the daughter of the innkeeper of the inn where Jesus and Mary go, or Joseph go, and where Jesus is born. And that sort of brings in a little bit of extra history of the shepherds and how they're looked down upon by now, although everyone started in that area as shepherds, and how proud her father is about the fact that he's made good with the world because he's a very busy innkeeper, and how this is brought down by the fact of the birth and so forth, and enemies are made friends again by that. And I have read it several times at the local Catholic church. The other schools won't take that kind of story, but the Catholic ones do. And so I've read it about 3 years running, and I've never actually published it. So I don't know. Maybe I will at some stage try and get that done. But yeah. Otherwise, it's piano, singing, talking to the ducks and the geese on the lake shore. Because I am alone now. I did send an email to a friend saying, "Oh my God, I'm talking to my taps," and she shot back with, "Well, so long as they don't talk back." So I could not resist. They are, yes. Yeah.
I love it. Yes, and I think that is the important part. Is as long as they don't talk back, then we'll be okay.
Yeah.
Well, Mary, we have just over a minute left in the show, but before I let you go, I wanted to ask if you would please, and it's totally and completely up to you, if you would like to share a bit of your story with our listeners. You can select any passage that you would like to read and share with us. Of course, we know you can't give it all. You have to buy the book for that. But if there's a bit that you wanted to share.
Okay. Halfway through chapter 1, the war begins, and I have the news was all over the place. The newspaper boys yelled it out at the tops of their young lungs. Those lucky enough to be in possession of a personal radio device huddled around the sets with their families. They were listening through the crackling static to the sober-voiced announcers as they told out the news. But mostly it was done in the old, time-honored way, from person to person, from door to door. This nation is at war. Dear God in heaven! Furiously, Ma'am slapped the damp tea-cloth on the kitchen table, making the two young men seated there shrink back from her wrath. It wasn't often that Jessie Parkin lost her temper so completely, but now she was fairly quivering with rage, a rage fueled by fear. So, you've signed up, the pair of you, without so much as telling Pa and me about it. Wait till your Pa gets back from work. He'll have a few words to say to you, especially you, George. What were you thinking of, encouraging our Willie to join up with you? He's but 14 years old. It's bad enough that you're going, but at least you're old enough to know your own mind. And then there are interruptions, and I guess that's probably long enough, isn't it, for your time slot?
I love it. She says, that's all you get. That's all you get. I love it.
It goes on a bit, but it probably is a bit too long. It goes for another page. So
I love it. Thank you so much, Mary, for sharing with us. I love spending these times. Like I said, I'm such a nostalgic person, and speaking to someone that reminds me very much of my grandmother is a very beautiful thing. So thank you so much for spending time with me today.
You're most welcome. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's fun.
And listeners, thank you for spending time with me as well. We hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you. Until next time, may you continue to realize that God's grace and mercy is with you every day, and that you are blessed in the Lord. Until next time, everyone, have a great day. Bye-bye.